Good morning, and thank you for that kind introduction. I'm excited to join you today on behalf of Ontario Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca. C'est un honneur d'être avec vous ce matin. And given the stay-at-home order, I thought it was most prudent to record my video from home instead of traveling to the studio in Mississauga. And while I'm delighted to join you virtually, I know we all would have preferred to gather in person, to reminisce about the challenges and triumphs of the year that was, to catch up over a drink, reconnect with friends and colleagues we've been apart from for so long. But until that day comes, we'll have to make do with these virtual get-togethers. I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to Mayor Alan Thompson and the entire leadership team at ROMA, et à tout qui a contribué à faire réaliser cette conférence virtuelle. With COVID-19 cases on the rise and hospitals on the brink of being overwhelmed, we are now in our second state of emergency. And I was recently thinking back to 2019 when the province announced changes to the public health funding formula. You all remember that this put a larger portion of the financial burden on local communities. It was clear to me then, as it is to me now, that this was a mistake. Communities were already stretched to provide public services to a level Ontarians expect and deserve. And COVID-19 has made apparent to everyone how important a strong public health system is and the valuable role municipalities play in ensuring our friends and neighbors remain healthy. As leaders in your own communities, you've shouldered a heavy burden this past year. Mask policies, tax deferrals, education campaigns, it's been local leaders, mayors, councillors, medical officers of health that have led the way. Votre leadership a été apprécié par tous les Ontariens et Ontariennes. So on behalf of a grateful province, thank you. Merci. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the MPP for Orleans, which is the easternmost suburb of Ottawa. It's where we like to say the sun rises on Canada's capital. It's been a little less than a year since I was elected to the legislature in a by-election. And though we didn't fully understand it at the time, we were already at the onset of the crisis. A few short weeks after I was elected, the province would declare an emergency, and our lives would be changed forever. Comme toi, j'ai regardé les conférences de presse chaque jour et essayé de comprendre ce que tout cela signifiait et essayé de répondre à toutes les questions des résidents. And of course, all those questions from family and friends who think that because we're elected, we have way more information than what's being shared. It's hard to think back and remember those early days when we all hoped and thought that this would be a short and manageable crisis. But sometime in the spring, it became apparent that this wasn't going to be a short pandemic, that this was going to be with us for a long time, and it would define and shape much of our future work and our lives. In the midst of that whirlwind, I was honored when our leader, Stephen Del Duca, asked me to serve as the Liberal critic for municipal affairs and housing, for transportation and infrastructure, for government and consumer services, and for Indigenous relations. Now, I'd show you a business card, but I'm not sure it would fit on the screen. And in all seriousness, I'm sure you might find yourself discussing one or two of those subjects over the next couple of days. Before embarking on this journey to Queen's Park, like all of you, I was immersed in the world of municipal government, serving as a city councillor in Ottawa for nearly a decade, and an additional 4 years before that as school trustee. I was honored to represent Cumberland Ward, geographically one of the largest wards in Ottawa, comprised of vast countryside with dozens of farms, 6 villages, 2 hamlets, and the growing suburban community of Orleans. In fact, what helped propel my first candidacy for City Council was the support from previous rural political leaders that helped me understand the important issues. And throughout my tenure on council, they became mentors and friends who I cherish to this day. And I'm sure over the years, my colleagues Eli Alchantieri and George DeRuse, and maybe Doug Thompson before them, shared with everyone at ROMA just how big Ottawa is. In fact, our mayor likes to brag that Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto, and Montreal can all fit in Ottawa with room to spare. And most of that land is rural. Farms and forests, streams and rivers, marshland, and a bog, with dozens of villages. These all make Ottawa's rural area one of the most attractive features of living in Canada's capital. Representing a mixed community and serving as vice chair of our Rural Affairs Committee, I experienced firsthand the difference between rural and urban lifestyle. And these differences often dominated some of the discourse, both in our community but also across the city. But at the end of the day, all the discussions boil down to a few similar points. Everyone wants a good job that doesn't just pay the bills but leads to a prosperous life for them and their families. Everyone wants value for the taxes they pay. All of us want safe roads to drive on, clean water to drink, and fresh air to breathe. We expect emergency services to show up when they're needed, and doctors and nurses to be available to treat us when we're sick. We want our children to have the best teachers and schools so that they can become their best selves. And in the 21st century, that means access to high-speed internet, not just in school, but at home as well. Et au cours de cette dernière année avec COVID-19 et dans ce que j'imagine sera le monde après, toutes ces aspirations ont pris un nouveau sens et importance sur la façon dont nous choisissons de reconstruire l'Ontario. And during this past year with COVID-19, and in what I imagine will be the world afterwards, all of these aspirations have taken on a new meaning and a growing importance on how we choose to rebuild Ontario. We already know that municipalities already do most of the work. They do all the heavy lifting because they're required to. You all run the day-to-day services that allow our communities to be some of the best places in the world to call home. And you do it with the lowest portion of taxes collected every year. Trust me, this is something I will constantly remind my caucus colleagues about. And now, in addition to that, you're trying to navigate an unprecedented public health crisis and the economic devastation that has ensued. And this is an economic crisis that will likely shape the rest of your term in office and well beyond. So now, more than ever, municipalities big and small need a provincial government that understands that cities and towns can't do it on their own. The economics of municipalities works differently. You can't always do more with less. We need a government that understands that its cuts to public health spending, that the constant turmoil and the downloading of responsibilities and expenses without the equivalent revenue tools is not going to help communities rebuild. Because let there be no mistake, the heart of any recovery in Ontario will be centered in our cities and our towns. It will be centered around the entrepreneur who decides to take a risk and open that new small business on Main Street. It will be centered around tourism and hospitality to bring people back to those picturesque locales that will once again be theirs to discover. It will be centered around innovations in technologies like precision agriculture to help farmers become more efficient, saving money and becoming more environmentally sensitive at the same time. Centré sur les opportunités et les avantages de notre communauté franco-ontarienne dynamique qui ouvre nos communautés à la monde. And it will be centered around the investments in community infrastructure that will ensure our schools are modernized, that our community centers and our arenas provide a place for children to gather and laugh and play, and that our roads don't crumble beneath us. Fiscal decisions made by previous governments resulted in thousands of kilometers of highways and roads and bridges being downloaded to municipal responsibility. It was an easy but short-sighted way for the province to make their balance sheet more attractive. But that past provincial government stuck property taxpayers with the bill. Maintaining this infrastructure has been a constant struggle. Property taxes were never designed to shoulder this kind of burden. And I've lived this in my own personal and professional life in Ottawa. Highway 174, which runs through the east end of Ottawa and turns into Highway 17 in Clarence-Rockland. It was downloaded by the province in the late 90s. And ever since, this flawed decision has put enormous pressure on taxpayers from both communities. Millions of dollars a year spent maintaining what is an enormous regional highway. And those property taxes could have better been spent ensuring neighborhood roads were properly maintained, could have built multi-use pathways for recreation, or that could have been put to use on any number of other important community needs. Uploading Highway 174 back to the province has been a goal of mine my entire political career. And that's why I was thrilled when our leader, Stephen Del Duca, committed that an Ontario Liberal government will work with local municipalities to determine which critical infrastructure investments need to be made, and whether or not those physical assets, which are important for our safety as well as for our economy, should be re-uploaded to the province. But Ontario's infrastructure needs are not limited to highways, bridges, and community centres. The lack of access to reliable internet connectivity has hindered the ability of rural Ontarians to work and learn from home. It's hindered the economic growth and the ability for businesses big and small to undertake commercial activities in many rural and remote communities. COVID-19 has taught us many lessons about both the resilience and the weaknesses in our economy. And broadband access is both. In areas of the province with fast, reliable broadband, many have been able to continue and even expand their business operations. People have worked from home. Children have been able to learn virtually. But for too many, across too many communities, this hasn't been the case. In my own riding in Orleans, the village of Carlsbad Springs doesn't have access to fast and reliable internet. You can drive from the heart of the village to Parliament Hill in just about 20 minutes. Imaginez qu'à une courte distance du siège du pouvoir du Canada, l'accès à Internet est si ténu. And while the Ford government has announced broadband funding many times, they've been slow to get their broadband dollars out the door. Ontario must treat broadband as an essential service. Investments in digital infrastructure and expanding broadband connectivity will play a critical role in our economic recovery, and ensuring small, remote, and rural communities aren't left behind will be essential to our success. Under the leadership of Stephen Del Duca, an Ontario Liberal government will make delivering high-speed, affordable, and reliable Internet to all Ontarians an urgent priority. Sous la direction de Stephen Del Duca, un gouvernement libéral s'assurer que l'Internet à haute vitesse, abordable et fiable est une priorité urgente pour le gouvernement. Now, given the new world we live in, as global supply chains become increasingly vulnerable, local production is ever more important. To support Ontario's critically important agri-food sector, an Ontario Liberal government will build 2 new Ontario food terminals, one in the east and another in the southwest. Moreover, an Ontario Liberal government will also help spur local economic development by decentralizing government and do our best to locate agencies and ministry functions in communities where the cost of housing is more reasonable and the quality of life is high. And these are just a few of the ideas we have for rebuilding Ontario. A few weeks ago, Stephen launched the beginning of our platform development process. And with nearly 75,000 members, the Ontario Liberal Party has a reservoir of talent and expertise that will help us rebuild Ontario. Our members include local political leaders, farmers, lawyers, doctors, engineers, urban planners, seniors, young people. But our plan would be incomplete if we only spoke to ourselves. We need to reach out to those who don't participate in partisan politics, who have felt left out over the last number of years. And so over the coming weeks, we'll share the ways in which Ontarians can participate. And I look forward to hearing from all of you about the ways we can rebuild Ontario and shape our relationship between municipalities and the province. I'd like to thank you for giving me the chance to share my thoughts and to speak on behalf of the Ontario Liberal Party and our leader, Stephen Del Duca. I wish you all the very best for a successful and productive ROMA conference. And I truly look forward to meeting with all of you in person once we overcome this pandemic. Donc, s'il vous plaît, restez en sécurité et en bonne santé. Et je ne peux pas attendre l'année prochaine, lorsque nous pourrons à nouveau réunir, partager un verre et célébrer la façon dont les collectivités rurales font de l'Ontario le meilleur endroit au monde pour vivre et élever une famille. Merci. Thank you.